Welcome to the Sober Unicorn. We are a gay-hosted, all-inclusive podcast about sobriety and addiction recovery for the LGBT plus community and all of our allies. I am your host, Holden, and thank you for joining us today. Hey, everybody, it's Holden back here again with the Sober Unicorn. Hope everybody's having a great day. If you are not having a good day, I do hope that it gets better. Today, we have a very unique and interesting guest with us. We met via Instagram. I made a post looking for guests. He reached out and he's lucky. We are gracious enough to have him on the episode. It is midnight here in Texas, so I did have to stay up a little late, which is okay to get him on, but schedules allotted. We finally have you here. How are you doing, Drew?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be on.
Of course. Thank you for taking the time because I know you've been traveling like crazy.
Yeah,
So,
a lot.
which is good. I mean, hey, I've been traveling here and there too, as much as money and time allows. So, why don't you kind of give everybody a little bit of insight of just like your name, where you're from, and kind of like how long you've been sober?
Sure. So I'm Drew Valentino. I am originally from New Jersey. I was there my whole life. And up until about a year and a half ago, I moved to Atlanta. I was in Atlanta for a year, and then in April moved to Los Angeles. I'm in West Hollywood, mostly because I do porn. I do porn and OnlyFans, porn with Falcon and Raging Stallion. And I also have been known to make I do a lot of comedy. I do stand-up comedy, but I also do lots of TikTok videos and Instagram reels. Um, so people see this like funny side of me, they see this porn side of me, but and I recently announced on Instagram that I've been making posts that I've been sober, and that's a side that people don't really know anything about. I haven't really talked publicly about it at all. And the short backstory is that I was on hard drugs when I was from 15. I started doing like ecstasy and coke and stuff. And then and nobody knows this until now, but at 17 I was introduced to heroin, and I was actually a heroin addict from 17 to 20. And I had a traumatic event happen where my closest friend had overdosed at my house, and I found him dead. He was the first person I ever came out to. And in fact, I came out to him that night. I came out to him that night, and then the next morning I went to wake him up, and he was dead. And that just turned my life upside down. And from that, I got sober. I was sober for, I mean, like sober, counting the days sober, nothing, for probably like 5 years. And then, and then for the next 5 years, I would drink socially, or maybe like smoke pot at like a concert or something. But the thing is, I just kind of never liked alcohol. I just don't love it. I do like the taste of wine with, having a glass of wine with dinner, or beer with dinner. So it's just not really something I ever really had an issue with. And that's just me. Like, I don't know, everybody's different. I have serious addiction problems, but alcohol just wasn't one of them. And like, so in the second half, basically, I feel like I consider myself sober for 10 years, but sober off of hard drugs, sober off of everything for 5 years. So, and then drinking socially, maybe a little pot here and there, never daily or anything like that, for another 5 years. And I was really happy about that. I was really proud of it. And at the 10-year mark, I was 30, and I got introduced to the circuit culture and started going to circuit parties with friends. And everybody's on so many drugs. And I just kind of felt like, you know what, when I was 20 or 17, I just didn't really have my life together yet. And so many people that don't have addiction problems use drugs recreationally without this big backlash in their life. At least some people do. And I just kind of thought, you know what, my life's together. I have a house, I have a job, I have a dog, I go to CrossFit every day, and like I have a whole community that supports me. And it's like it kind of was like justifying, like, you know what, most people live their adult lives and experiment with drugs, and like maybe I can too. Well, now that I have my life together, and I do feel like that was a lot of just like justification. I mean, there's some truth to that, but deep down inside, ultimately, I am an addict. Like, I was an addict then, I still am now. I have very addictive behavior. And yeah, I have my life together more now, but that's I'm still an addict and still do not well with balance. And so basically, in the circuit community, I got introduced to G, GHB, and which is very prevalent in the circuit community. And it's basically, like, to anybody that's not familiar, it's essentially, it's like I call it alcohol B. Like, it's a different kind of, it's like, it's very similar to alcohol, but in my opinion, I feel like it's not as bad. Because so if you like look into it, it's actually like it has medicinal purposes in like hospitals and stuff. And I just feel it just, I've spent lots of my time with alcohol in my system. I've spent lots of time with G in my system. I've done too much of alcohol, too much of G. I've done the right amount. And it just, over and over again, it just felt like G was like less toxic to the body. And I felt like I was more with it. Like, alcohol, you like the more you drink, the less you remember, and less, really inhibits you. I mean, it stops your inhibitions. Whereas I feel like the effect of G on that was not as much. So that was why it was a problem, because I felt like it was more manageable to use at parties and stuff, and then it's just like, it just, I don't know, it just opened up the floodgates of like chaos. Because when you're constantly surrounded by party drugs, it just makes it very easy to slip up. And now it's like this gray area, like I don't do well with gray areas. It's like I need to be sober, or or like I want to do everything. So it's like, there was hard drugs around me. And um I feel like nothing is not as addictive as like heroin or meth, but it's still not good. And it left me, I feel like, chasing some other high, you know.
So, do you think that like being in the circuit party scene that you kind of had to do these substances in order to stay with it with the friends and everything that you surrounded
Totally.
yourself with?
Totally, because I got a, talk about having an addictive personality. The thing I got addicted to was not the drugs; it was the circuit party. Like, anybody that goes to a circuit party for their first time or the first few times and has a great time and loves it with party drugs involved, it's most people that do that and have a great time are like, when's the next one? I can't wait. I'm like, can't stop thinking about it. And that's how I was. And I just met somebody that just got into the circuit scene, and that's his behavior. His disposition is like, when's the next thing? I can't wait. Oh my God, that was so much fun. And the thing is, it's like, just, I don't know, just you go and you're up really, really late, and it's like G kind of keeps you going. And it's a lot of fun. It's funny because now I go to the circuit parties still sober, but I there's like a bunch of reasons why I can do that. I could not have done that in the beginning. There's no way. It's definitely a lot harder than people think.
So, of course, you
And
were
yeah.
doing circuit parties, of course, using G and stuff. So at what point did you finally be like, okay, this needs to fully stop and let me go back to being sober with abstaining from everything?
So to be completely honest, I I went really hard for 1 year, just really kind of letting go and just doing whatever at these parties. So basically, I kind of there was a year, particularly last summer, where I was just doing whatever, and it was very it was just chaos. Like I look back at that, what it was is that COVID ended. Like, well, I shouldn't say it ended, but COVID, the restrictions really let up. And last summer was the first summer where all circuit parties were happening again, and everybody booked everything. And it kind of felt like previously it was like you chose a small handful of circuit parties over the course of like the summer, where whereas last year, I feel like everybody booked everything. And then even if you didn't, then you got so much FOMO from seeing everybody at every party that you just booked whatever was left. And I was going to a circuit party like every other weekend, traveling for it. And it was exhausting. And with the drug use, like there was so much, like it was just so chaotic that when I look back at that summer, like it was not a good summer. Like there was just so many bad things that happened and just such a mess. And market days, which is in August in Chicago, I did the most. I did way too much. I felt awful the whole weekend. I barely remember some of the weekend. And because I ended up sleeping all like one full day of it, and like it was just awful. And I come back and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And basically, from market days to Atlanta Pride, which is a good like month and a half, I was like, I want to be completely sober. I want to, and that was that was the very beginning of this. Was over a year ago. I was sober for a month and a half, and I didn't want to deal with that chaos. And then I started to notice after like a week or two that I started to feel like $1,000,000 every day. I just was eating right, sleeping right, working out, and I just felt good. And and at some point I was thinking, you know what? I'm not even chasing not feeling like shit anymore. Or I should say, I'm not even just trying to avoid not feeling like shit. I want to chase feeling good. Like, and that's how we're supposed to feel every day. You're supposed to feel good. We just forget that because you get so in a, even if you're not doing anything hard, like even if you're just drinking, but every weekend, and not during the week, but every weekend, like it takes more than just a few days for your body to bounce back. But if every weekend you go back to it, like you never stabilize to that feeling like $1,000,000 feeling that we're supposed to feel, and like the analogy that I make is, especially with the harder drugs, if you, let's say you get a cut on your arm, and that's equivalent, that's my analogy, is like doing the party drugs. In the next few days, it hurts, it's uncomfortable, you can't stop thinking about it, right? And it's like feeling like shit after doing a bunch of party drugs. And then maybe like a week later, it will normalize enough where it doesn't hurt anymore. It's not destroying your day, but it's still there. Like as if a cut could crust over, or scab over. It's uncomfortable, but it's not really distracting. And then after that goes away, you don't even notice it. Even if you feel it, you don't even notice it. But there's still a red mark there. And it's like, even though on the surface level, from your perspective, it feels like you're back to normal, by looking at it that not everything's really back to its right place yet. And there's a mark that might take a whole month to go away. And I feel like it's the same thing with party drugs. It's like you do it, you feel like shit. It's slowly, you start to feel more normal. But even normal is not $1,000,000. You know what I mean? And I feel like it takes a good 2 weeks of sobriety to feel for all the things to get right back into place, maybe more depending on what the drug is. And my eyes started to open to that, and I started to realize like I want to feel the best I could possibly feel all the time. And it's so easy to go months or years without where you're doing party drugs every weekend, even if it's something light like having a beer, it's like you aren't going to feel like $1,000,000 for another week, and then if you do it again, it's like, what the hell, you know?
I
And
mean, with
yeah.
circuit parties, of course, and the industry that you work in, there is a, I think, a unspoken expectation of appearance standards and body standards. So, do you
Mm.
ever feel pressure from industry to use any drugs to either lengthen stamina or to be able to handle, depending on what position you're in, handle the person your partner seeing, or again to do steroids or anything to maintain the body that you need, or that's kind of expected unspokenly within the circuit scene?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's all of that because with the like, you know, well, it's basically so okay. So basically, what we're targeting right now is three different things, right? Because there's dick meds, right? Viagra and Cialis and stuff. That's what you're, yeah. So that I see a urologist who monitors my sexual health and my dick health essentially because I do porn. And he prescribes me Viagra and Cialis, but I talk to him, you know, I asked him if being on these things somewhat regularly can affect your, libido or ability to get and stay hard later down the line. And like he says no, as long as you are, you know, careful, monitoring, and you're not taking it all the time. Well, he even said even if you take it a lot, it's Cialis and Viagra is not shown to show like a tolerance over time.
Hmm.
Uh, the other thing that it sounds like you're talking about is poppers. So, I, I mean, I don't know if that's what you're getting
Well,
at, but you
kind
said,
of, because there's okay. So research that I've done many years ago, after seeing certain companies' videos, and I was like, how is the bottom handling this situation? And due to my research, it was that they were actually putting heroin into the bottom's hole.
oh, so you mean it's like harder drugs and
Yeah.
stuff. Okay, I've never seen or felt pressured. I've never seen that. No. In fact, most studios by law have to be really careful. Like if you said I want to do poppers, you can't. You can't on set because it's one of those things where some studios might look the other way and then there's usually no consequences and nothing bad happens. But on books, like on paper, you can't they can't allow you to do poppers. They actually have lines and laws that you can't you can, if I have Cialis, I'm not allowed to give it to my scene partner because it's not prescribed. And then under this, now that's not to say I wouldn't like on the side, but I
Yeah.
can't openly say want to Cialis. You know what I mean? Like, so they're really careful with that. Studios are very by the book. I mean, I work the one I work for anyway, and I hear that most major ones are the same. I'm the
Okay, so
little
maybe it
guy
was just the
studio.
studio that I was researching, and maybe it may not be by the book because there's several lawsuits against them due
Yeah.
to longevity of rehab by their scenes and stuff by their actors. So that's why I asked that question, because I honestly felt that it was maybe a industry wide thing of the pressure of usage of narcotics. So
Yeah, no, I mean, in my experience, no, but I'm exclusive for Falcon, so I only work with one studio. And I would imagine that any major porn studio that has a reputable name, knows that that would be a big mistake on their part. But, who's to say that that's not going on secretively too? You know what I mean? But there's definitely not pressure. But the thing is, so like porn is a really can be a difficult field to be in terms of mental health. And one thing that a porn star that I know that talked to me about this before getting into it, he kind of debriefed me, and he's been doing porn for years, studio porn, and he kind of explained to me that you have to be really cognizant about what you're doing and what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, because the studio will, there's lots of pressure for the scene to go well. And there's times where you're fucking and maybe you're a little uncomfortable for whatever reason, but you kind of just keep it to yourself because you don't want to disrupt, you don't want to ruin the porn, you don't want to stop the porn, the production, and you don't want to cause any inconvenience or something. And he was kind of basically saying to me that you got to be really careful, because it's like if you are not okay with something but are just doing it anyway because you feel pressured, that over time that causes like micro traumas, and like that's not okay. You have to be really adamant in the porn industry. If you're in the moment, you're just not comfortable or enjoying what's happening, you need to stand up for yourself. So with that being said, I can imagine that there probably are some people that, based off of that pressure, even though the studio is not aware of it, might be using some illicit drug behind closed doors because they don't, they want the porn to go well. You know what I mean? There's all this
Hmm.
unspoken pressure. If you got to take a big dick and your solution is some drug to kind of cope with it, like I wouldn't be surprised if that's happening secretly.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and then switching over to the, I call it the Adonis factor, which is like the body expectation of maintaining a certain physique. Do you feel any pressure, whether it's yourself, industry, or parties or friends, that if you were to gain a little bit of weight, that you need to possibly do coke, meth, or anything to quickly pull the weight back?
For me, the drug use has always been about feeling good, and it's never been functionally to lose weight, or, so for me personally, that's a no. Um, but I'm sure that that does exist, in the porn industry.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, I
yeah,
think that exists within any society,
yeah, that's
actually.
very true.
I mean, you don't have to be in the adult film industry to be like, "Ooh, I need to lose 20 pounds." Like a week on meth is gonna fix
Right.
me right up.
Right. Lead me
Um,
right up.
so of course, now that you're sober, completely sober, going to parties, going to promotional events, and constantly kind of being around drinking, and we could just leave it as alcohol, not even really party drugs, but how do you abstain or put yourself in a comfortable
Yeah,
situation?
that's a great question. So, first of all, I realized I don't, you said how long have you been sober? I mentioned I was sober for 5 years, questionably sober for 10, but I never really talked about reason. So I got sober. I want to say I'm 82 days sober. And the truth is that going to these circuit parties has been a really big part of my life and a fun part of my life for the past 2 years. Not only, not only do I enjoy it, but my friend group is all people in the circuit community. So it's not so easy for me to just say, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore. But it's funny because most, when I announced or posted that I've been, the first post I just mentioned that I was 50 days sober, and I didn't really give much context. And lots of people reached out, which was really nice. Friends, people I don't know, lots of people. I think it created the mystery, created this like sense of like, is everything okay? Like, I lots of people, lots of friends, text me, are you okay? Is everything okay? And I appreciate that. But the thing is that I think that that makes sense. If you don't know about my history with heroin and that I was sober for 10 years, you wouldn't know that you wouldn't, without that context, right? It seems like maybe some heavy shit went down. Some heavy shit did go down 13 years ago. And now, as I've been experimenting with, partying, like nothing crazy traumatic happened, but I've been it was kind of a mess, and I wanted it to end, and I want that control and stability back. Um, but I have that 10 years under my belt. So me going to these circuit parties is kind of a unique situation where I can manage for a number of reasons. And I really don't think that it would be smart or doable for most people that don't have the 10 years under their belt to try. So for me, the reason why it's been working for me is because well, for one, so there's two big things that I get out of circuit that don't depend on drugs, and it doesn't change now that I'm sober. So for one, I I I mentioned I'm big on comedy and I do stand up. From the beginning, even when I was partying, like I love going to these circuit parties because it's a very sex based environment, which is a great opportunity for me to be me. And just a lot of my comedy is based in sex. So something I love to do is just bounce around. Even when I was high on G, like I would just love being like silly and goofy and funny about sex, and like I would be like very theatrical, like on the floor, like sucking dick, dancing, like get up and make a quip about it. And like it was fun, and like I enjoyed making people laugh and being this funny, exaggerated, like circuit version of myself that was just so over the top and ridiculous. And the truth is, I can still do that. Like I can still be funny and silly and ridiculous at, at in this sex based environment. I don't need to be high to do that. That's something I learned. And then also, and this might not be the healthiest thing, but I definitely also get a lot of validation at these parties because, um, because I do porn, and people recognize me from TikTok or Twitter, and so I get lots of people that come up to me and introduce themselves and say, "Oh, I follow you on such and such," or "I love your TikToks," or "I love your stand up," and it's like that's a lot of fun for me, and I don't need to be high for that. Like that's not something that changes because I'm sober. So I get a lot of satisfaction and validation from going to these parties. That, and again, maybe the validation seeking behavior is not always the best for your mental health, but the thing is, like, I can go, I can have fun. And with that 10 years of experience under my belt of being sober and how badly and I want to be sober, how determined I am to be sober, like I can be around, like I have not really had an issue. I can understand going to these parties and think like, man, I really want to do drugs. I shouldn't. I'm not going to, but I really want. I don't even feel that way. I'm just like, don't want anything to do with the drugs. I'm really happy, really proud to be sober, and I'm just having a lot of fun. And you know, um, so yeah.
So, two questions I have. So, of course, we have talked about that you did not seek out a 12-step program or any recovery program itself.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think the way you were able to get sober without any assistance was being scared straight due to the trauma 13 years ago?
100%.
Okay.
100%. It was because of this horrible, and there's a lot more detail that I'm not going to go into now, but like that event single-handedly changed my life. It was awful, and I feel so terrible about what happened, um, and for what happened to him and his family, and that got me sober. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I was scared straight. The one. Okay, so something that's really, this is probably the most important thing I probably have to say is that when this happened, I felt like my life had turned upside down and this was awful and there was no way I could recover from it. I felt like with all this going on, this is already going to be really, really difficult to make a life for myself between the trauma and the effects that happened, like I had legal issues and all types of problems. And I was thinking it's going to be really, really difficult to bounce back from this. And that's if I'm perfect. Like if I do everything I should possibly do, it's going to be difficult. So I better at least be that. I thought I started. So when all this happened, I didn't go out. I didn't talk to my friends. I didn't do anything. I was in my home. I was a zombie for a year, and the only thing I really had was school. I wanted to be a teacher, and I was going to school to be a teacher, And I was scared that, like, because I've also been arrested 3 times, that, like, if I keep doing these things, like, how am I ever gonna, what if I go to school and then I get a degree and I can't get a job because of my history? So I was really set on school. After that, I got straight A's, literally graduated with like 4.0. And I was so fixated on education. I was fixated. Then I started getting to fitness. I started fixating on that. Then I wanted to try stand up. This was 10 years ago, and I started going to comedy clubs, and I fixated on that. And I started to realize that, and this is like my best piece of wisdom in terms of sobriety, is that addicts are the most powerful people in the world, because we all will stop at nothing to get what we want. And when what you want is drugs, it just drives you to the ground. But when you can apply that determination towards positive things and life goals, no one can stop you. And I felt like in the 10 years that I was sober, or I should say off hard drugs, one by one, I came up with a goal and I nailed it over and over again. And I felt like the most powerful person in the world. And like I said, I wanted to do stand up. I did stand up. I wanted to become a teacher. I became a teacher. Like, I wanted to get into fitness. I started competing competitively at CrossFit, and I got straight A's in school. And it's like all these things I wanted to do, I did it. I decided I wanted to leave teaching and get a job for more money. And like, I went back to school, got another 4.0, got a job in the pharma industry. And that's what I do now during the day. And like that, that's part of the reason why I'm like, you know what? I kind of want that power back. That's why I decided to get sober again. It's not necessarily this horrible traumatic thing that happened to me a few months ago. It's just like I just missed that power and stability, you know. And yeah, like that's definitely my advice to anybody that's, well, whether you're just getting sober or been sober, it's really just take that addiction and make it work for you instead of against you, you know.
Mhm. So, of course, the other question I had was, you go to circuit parties now, sober, and other events, just not even circuit parties, just parties nonetheless. You probably still have friends that are actively using or
Mhm.
drinking. I mean, do you always have an escape plan?
Yeah, so there's definitely a few. Okay, so first of all, I had mentioned a year ago, when after market days, I was like, okay, enough's enough. So I actually I got a little distracted. So I was sober for a month and a half, but then after that, I broke the sobriety. I mean, I wasn't planning to be sober forever, but I was sober for a bit, and then after that, I said I need to reel it in. And for the last year, I've done considerably less partying. I was going to less parties and then doing less at the parties, and it was an improvement. But I am still an addict, and like it still came with so much chaos and just this whole game of like, oh, I want to do enough to feel good at the party, but not enough that I'm upset with myself. It just became this mental mind fuck that just was not good for my mental health. And but I did reel it in successfully. And I felt like one of the things I thought about and realized was that, there's times like, whether you're drinking or on G or whatever, there's times where you've had a few drinks or a few doses of G, you're not sober, but you kind of feel sober because you've been partying for 2, 3 hours. You feel sober, but you're not. I thought to myself at one point, I need to recognize when that's happening and learn to be okay with that, and learn to that it's okay to be at a party and start to sober up a little bit, and you don't need to go get fucked up. So I think that I've had a year under my belt of doing considerably less of everything and feeling much more sober. So I feel like I didn't just start going to circuit parties completely sober out of nowhere. It was like I kind of ease into it over the course of a year, and that's really the only thing that's really made it possible. And I think that there's two main concerns or issues that come with it. One, there's times where I'm okay with my sobriety. I'm okay being sober, but I know that nobody else is. So I find that I myself a little bit more irritable when people are bumping into me and they're all sweaty and like they're high as hell, completely unaware. And so that's definitely taken some getting used to. And the other thing is the energy level. There's times where like I'm tired and I just got there and it's midnight and it's like I'm tired and I'm already not having the greatest time, and it's like I don't necessarily feel like, oh, I want to get high, but it's just like, how am I going to have the energy to stay at this party? And I tried
Red Bull.
I tried. That's what all the sober people do. They just chain chug sugar-free Red Bulls. I try to go that route, and I've learned that doesn't really work for me. Because what happens is it gives me energy for about a half hour, and then I start crashing hard, and I start yawning uncontrollably to the point where my eyes are watering. I've learned the best thing to do is to have coffee before, and then the other that's it. And the other thing is I just got to accept that, like, when I'm tired, it's time to go. I'm sober, but I'm not going to be there past 2. You know what I mean? Like I'll go, I'll have fun. I'm not staying past 2, and that's the difference. Is that you can still go to the party and have a good time, but then just not stay out till 5.
I
Like I
think
just
that was the most shocking thing for me is when in my addiction, especially drinking, because drinking was my main thing. That I could be at the bar till 2, and then prepay drinks because I knew the owner, and be there
oh
till 4 or 5, and then when the
yeah,
bartender's like, "Okay, we've cleaned up, let's go," I'm like finishing my last shots and go to an after party and stuff like that. And now that I'm sober, I'm just like, it's like 10 p.m. And I'm
right,
like,
right,
okay,
yeah,
girl, time to get your ass in a
yeah. It's
bed. I'm like, how did I, how did I stay out so late? Especially drinking, where it's something that brings you down and
mm,
eventually, of course, tires you out. But
right, yeah. My mantra to myself, as I've been going to these parties sober, is I'd rather this than that. Meaning that when I'm not having a 10 out of 10 time like I used to, or I'm a little tired, you know what? That's not great. You wish you would have the best time. You wish you weren't tired. I would so much though rather deal with being a little tired or having a mediocre time than becoming the train wreck that I would become, from using. And that's why every time somebody bumps into me and they're drenched in sweat and didn't even know they did it and knocked the drink out of my hands and I'm tired, I'm just like, you know what? I would rather just deal with this than do Lord knows what party drug. You know what I
I mean, the
mean?
only
Like,
good thing is the drink that knocking out of your hand is now a bottle of water or a
yeah, it's a
$2
water.
soda,
Yeah.
not a $13 alcoholic
Right.
beverage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
before we bring the episode to a close, is there anything that you haven't shared with everybody that you would like to?
Um, no, I feel like I covered all the main things that have kind of been, you know, on my mind. Well, the one thing I also want to say is I think it's interesting how even though I've been sober, and going to these parties, it's funny how like the next, talk about chasing like feeling good from sobriety. I feel like it's funny how I'll stay up all night and caffeinated, no drugs. I still feel like shit for a day or two. It's much easier to bounce back. But my point is, I'm starting to reevaluate and thinking, like, okay, this is working for me, but I want to do less parties even without the drugs. Like, I just am accepting the fact that it's okay to pull back and do a lot less, like,
Yeah,
so, but
exactly.
yeah.
One thing I was gonna mention I forgot to earlier was you stated that you shared a post on Instagram, that you were 50 days sober, and that you had people reach out. The thing is, with the industry that you work in, and especially with the depending on which Instagram it was, that when you portray yourself as this sexual being, people forget that you're a human with struggles of
Right.
possible addiction and mental health. And so when you are vulnerable like that and share your story and share your struggles, people that are watching you and looking up to you, or um, that could share the same struggle, could benefit from that. And so I
Totally.
think it's amazing that you shared that on your Instagram's 50 Days Sober is a lot of sobriety. Considering like most previous guests said, some people can't get even 24 hours or don't even have
Hmm.
the opportunity to obtain that. So it's great that you are willing to try, of course, portray your adult industry lifestyle, as well as making sure that people realize that you are still a human with the same struggles that other people have.
Right, right. And that's the thing. And that's kind of why I want to share my story, is because I met a few people in the industry a year plus ago that are completely sober. Bo Butler is counting the days sober, and there's several others. And like, if I didn't hear that, like, that's what planted the seed. If I didn't hear that, I don't think I would have even considered this as an option. And so that's why it's important for me to share that.
Exactly. So if anybody is like resonated with your story, or maybe they're just interested in seeing your dingaling on video, how can they reach out to you or find you via social media?
Yeah, so basically, most I'm mostly on Drew Valentino XL on Twitter and OnlyFans, and um, really, if you and on Instagram too, is my professional Instagram, and then Drewsy Fruit, like the gum, um, is my Instagram and my TikTok, my personal Instagram and my TikTok.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Drew, for joining us
Yeah.
today. And now that it's like 11 o'clock your time, I hope you get
Mhm.
some sleep before work
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Same. Me
Awesome.
too.
Have a good night.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you again for listening to today's episode. Hit that follow button to be notified about new episodes every week. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can find us on Instagram at The Sober Unicorn Podcast, or on our website at thesoberunicornpodcast.com. There you will find our episodes, as well as our very own sober-owned shop, featuring products from small businesses that are sober-owned. And remember, everyone, don't be normal, be a unicorn, but better yet, be a sober unicorn.